Look at her sitting there pretending to belong. She's just a nobody, a low-level failure who spent 4 years washing trucks in the military, while her cousin built a real enterprise. My Aunt Clara's sharp, shrill voice cut through the polite murmur of clinking glassware at the Pinecrest Community Center. Over 70 prominent town figures, local business owners, council members, and reporters turned in unison. Every single pair of eyes settled heavily on me. I sat at a corner table near the back exit, wearing a modest dark green dress. I was Captain Nora Vance, a decorated Marine Corps logistics officer and veteran investigator. I had spent 8 years managing multi-million-dollar supply chains in active combat zones, leading convoys through high-threat environments, and surviving brutal conditions overseas. I had driven 3 hours after finishing a grueling duty shift just to attend what my family claimed was a quiet memorial dinner for my late grandmother. Instead, I'd walked straight into a televised campaign and business launch party. My cousin, Chloe, stood under the warm stage spotlights in a white designer dress, beaming beside a massive digital banner that read, "Chloe Vance, founder of Vet Care Logistics and Township Council candidate." "Aunt Clara, please," I said quietly, standing up and holding my hands steady, forcing my voice to remain calm despite the hot sting of anger and embarrassment in my throat. "I came here because you told me Grandma's personal photo albums were being passed out to the family tonight." "Don't bring your grandmother into your pathetic excuses," Clara interrupted loudly, stepping to the front of the stage and pointing a manicured finger directly at me. "Your grandmother would be disgusted by how you turned your back on this town. Chloe spent the last 3 years building a regional transport network that employs local veterans. What have you ever done for anyone besides hide behind a desk and beg for family handouts?" Chloe took the microphone from her mother, putting on a practiced, mournful expression that looked so convincing it made my stomach drop. "It's okay, Mom," Chloe said into the microphone, her voice dripping with calculated pity. "Nora has always struggled with resentment. While I was risking my personal savings to build vet care logistics and help homeless veterans find employment, Nora was dodging real responsibility. We can't all choose to serve our community." A wave of low whispers and judgmental glances swept through the room. A local reporter near my table shook his head, muttering, "Unbelievable. Imagine being jealous of your own charity work." The public humiliation burned through my chest like acid. Overwhelmed by raw betrayal and emotional exhaustion, I pulled my purse over my shoulder, turned away from the mocking gazes, and walked out into the chilly night. The cool night air hit my face as I stood beside my truck in the gravel parking lot, my hands trembling violently against the cold steering wheel. I took slow, tactical breaths, fighting to regain my composure. Buzz. My phone chimed in my pocket. It was an automated notification from a regional business news channel's social media page. Chloe's campaign was streaming live from inside the hall. Over 3,000 local residents were watching the broadcast online. "We are so proud to announce Vet Care Logistics' new $500,000 municipal contract. Our fleet of specialized transport vans was made possible thanks to exclusive veteran-owned business grants and federal logistics equipment transfers." My heart stopped. Federal logistics equipment transfers? I zoomed in on the framed certificate displayed on the screen. Listed in fine print at the bottom of the municipal contract was an official Department of Defense equipment allocation code, a code that belonged strictly to active-duty Marine Corps surplus units. My cousin hadn't just built a business, she had somehow used my active-duty officer credentials and military registration number to acquire federal surplus vehicles meant for legitimate veteran organizations. My hands shook as I opened my military email portal on my phone. Lying in my inbox was an urgent, flagged message from the Marine Corps Logistics Command Audit Division, sent less than an hour ago. Subject line: Notice of discrepancy, unauthorized fleet transfer number 4882. I opened the attached audit trail. The documents showed that 4 heavy-duty transport vehicles and 2 commercial trailers valued at over $350,000 had been released from a federal depot 6 months ago under the signature of Captain Nora Vance. Someone had forged my official signature, used my officer ID number, and redirected federal military transport assets to a private commercial company owned by my cousin and aunt. If federal auditors inspected VetCare Logistics, I wouldn't just lose my rank and commission, I would face court-martial and federal prison for grand larceny and military property fraud. How did Chloe get access to my digital signature and officer ID file? Before I could start my engine, a dark SUV pulled into the spot right next to my truck, blocking my exit. The driver's side door opened, and a stern-looking man in a dark suit stepped out into the dim light of the parking lot. He held a leather badge folder in his hand. "Nora Vance?" he asked in a sharp, uncompromising tone. "I am Investigator Miller with the State Ethics and Public Integrity Board. We've been tracking an illegal municipal bidding scheme involving VetCare Logistics." My chest tightened. "Investigator, I have nothing to do with my cousin's business. My signature was forged." "Save it, Captain," Miller interrupted, leaning against my truck door. "An anonymous tip was submitted to our office 2 hours ago, containing notarized affidavits signed by your aunt, Clara. She provided sworn statements claiming you operate as a silent 50% partner in VetCare Logistics, and that you personally handled all federal equipment transfers in exchange for political kickbacks." My blood ran cold. They hadn't just stolen my identity, they had preemptively built a legal trap to ensure that if the fraud was ever discovered, I would take 100% of the criminal blame while Chloe walked away as an innocent victim. If I fled the scene, it would be interpreted as a confession of guilt. If I stayed, I was facing immediate state and federal detention. I sat, frozen in my truck cab, my mind racing as my tactical training fought against panic. Assess the threat, gather intelligence, neutralize the Dector. Suddenly, the rear door of my truck clicked open. Someone slipped into the back seat, breathing heavily in the dark. I flinched, turning instantly. "Who is that?" "Nora, shut the door and don't make a sound," a hushed, trembling voice whispered. It was Sam, Chloe's younger brother and my youngest cousin. He was a quiet, introverted 22-year-old who worked as the night dispatcher for VetCare Logistics. He looked terrified, holding a thick, leather-bound ledger tight against his chest. "Sam," I gasped, "what are you doing back here?" "I was the one who submitted the discrepancy report to the Marine Audit Division an hour ago, and I sent you the email alert." I stared at him in complete disbelief. "You reported your own sister?" "Because what she and Mom are doing isn't just illegal, Nora. It's evil," Sam said, his voice cracking as tears filled his eyes. "They told me they were just using your name for tax exemptions, but yesterday I found the real accounting books in Mom's office safe. They aren't hiring veterans at all. They hire vulnerable local military vets, pay them under minimum wage off the books, and make them sign over their disability checks as housing fees to stay in family-owned rental properties." A wave of pure disgust washed over me. "They are exploiting disabled veterans? And they used your military credentials to secure the municipal contract," Sam added, handing me the ledger. "Everything is in here, the real payroll, the forged signature stamps, and the offshore account where Chloe is transferring the profits. They bought Mom a $100,000 beach home last week." I took the ledger, flipping through the pages under the cabin light. The level of cold, calculating corruption was staggering. My father had passed away 5 years ago, leaving his share of our family's original transport property to me, but because I was deployed overseas, I had signed a temporary power of attorney, allowing Aunt Clara to manage the land. Aunt Clara and Chloe hadn't just used my military identity to steal equipment, they had used that temporary power of attorney to secretly mortgage my late father's land, using the equity to fund the startup costs for vet care logistics. They were using my land, my identity, and my father's memory to build a fraudulent business empire while publicly branding me as a penniless, selfish failure. Sam, I said, looking him dead in the eye, if we put this ledger in front of the authorities, your mother and sister will go to prison. Are you ready for what happens next? Sam took a deep, shaky breath and wiped his face. Uncle David, your dad, was the only person in this family who was ever good to me. I won't let them ruin his daughter or hurt those veterans any longer. 10 minutes later, the double wooden doors of the Pinecrest Community Center Hall burst open with a heavy, resounding thud. The campaign launch was in full swing. Chloe was standing at the main podium under the bright spotlights, holding a glass of champagne, surrounded by local council members, business leaders, and news reporters. Aunt Clara stood beside her, beaming with arrogant pride. I walked straight down the center carpeted aisle. I was no longer wearing my dark green civilian dress. I was wearing my formal Marine Corps service dress blue uniform, my captain bars gleaming on my shoulders, my ribbons and tactical badges pinning my chest. Sam walked 3 paces behind me, holding the leather ledger. The chatter in the hall died down instantly. The camera operators turned their lenses toward the aisle. "Nora?" Aunt Clara sneered, her face twisting into immediate fury as she stepped to the edge of the stage. "How dare you come back in here dressed in that uniform to embarrass this family? Security, remove her immediately." 2 local venue guards moved forward, but Investigator Miller stepped through the doors behind me, holding up his official badge. "Stand down. State investigation." The room went dead, breathless, silent. Chloe forced a tight, artificial smile, leaning into the microphone. "Nora, please, if you need money or a job, we can talk about it privately after the event. You don't need to make a scene in front of our donors." "I don't need your money, Chloe," I said, my voice projecting clearly through the hall with absolute, unyielding military discipline. "And I certainly don't need a job from a company built on forged federal documents, stolen military equipment, and stolen land." Before Aunt Clara could scream, Sam stepped up to the audiovisual control station near the side of the stage. He plugged a flash drive directly into the main projector system. The campaign display on the giant screens behind Chloe vanished. In its place flashed high-resolution scans of the real vet care logistics accounting ledger, showing the forged signatures bearing my Marine Corps officer ID, side by side with the bank records showing $400,000 in diverted funds flowing directly into Aunt Clara's personal offshore account. A collective, horrified gasp erupted from the 70 guests. "What is this nonsense?" Clara shouted, her voice dropping all polish, turning high and hysterical. "She made it up. She's mentally unstable from her deployment." "Read page 12, Aunt Clara," I replied calmly. "The page where you used my dead father's forged power of attorney to mortgage his property while I was in active combat." The local news reporter near the front stage gasped, stepping closer to read the screen. Is that federal military property fraud?" "She didn't forge anything," Sam's voice boomed over the room's sound system as he spoke into a microphone. "I kept the books for 3 years. Chloe and Mom have been stealing disabled veterans' benefits and using Nora's military identity to dodge federal taxes." Chloe's face turned completely ghost white. She dropped her champagne glass, the glass shattering across the hard oak floor. Before Clara could rush toward Sam, a voice boomed from the back of the hall. "Stationary. Nobody move." Walking down the aisle with rigid, thunderous footsteps was a tall, imposing Marine Corps Master Gunnery Sergeant in crisp dress blues, accompanied by 2 state troopers and a federal prosecutor. It was Master Gunnery Sergeant Thomas, a veteran investigator from the Marine Corps Criminal Investigation Division, whom I had worked with on overseas logistics audits years ago. The entire hall held its breath. Master Gunnery Sergeant Thomas walked straight past the frozen town council members and stopped right at the base of the stage. He looked up at my aunt and cousin with cold, piercing disgust. "Captain Nora Vance," Thomas said, turning to me and giving a sharp, crisp, and flawless military salute. I raised my hand and returned the salute with total composure. "Master Gunnery Sergeant?" Thomas turned back to the crowd, his voice booming off the walls. 2 hours ago, NCIS and the Department of Defense Inspector General opened a formal investigation into vet care logistics for federal property theft, identity fraud of an active duty officer, and human exploitation of military veterans. Clara stumbled backward, grabbing the podium to keep from falling. "You can't do this. This is a private event. My daughter is running for city council." "Your daughter is going to federal court," the prosecutor beside Thomas announced plainly. The collapse of their facade was immediate and total. The 2 state troopers stepped up onto the stage, pulling Aunt Clara's and Chloe's hands behind their backs. The sharp, metallic click-click of handcuffs echoed loudly through the silent hall. Chloe burst into hysterical, frantic sobbing, struggling against the cuffs as the reporter's camera flashes lit up her face, capturing every second of her public disgrace. "Sam, do something! Tell them it was Sam! Tell them it was Nora!" Chloe shrieked as she was dragged down the stage steps. Aunt Clara looked at me with wild, bloodshot eyes, screaming curses as she was escorted past the very council members and donors she had tried to impress. Not a single person offered a word of support. The local council members immediately announced the cancellation of the municipal contract and vowed to cooperate fully with federal prosecutors. Investigator Miller walked up to me, handing back my military credentials. "Captain Vance, all fraudulent claims against your record have been dismissed. The state has already placed a freeze on Clara's assets to recover your father's land." "Thank you, investigator," I said softly. An hour later, as the crowd dispersed and police cruisers pulled away into the night, I stood outside on the quiet porch of the community center. Sam stepped out beside me, wrapping his jacket tight around his shoulders, looking down at his shoes. "Are you going to be okay, Sam?" I asked gently. "I don't know," Sam whispered, a tear rolling down his cheek. "My family is completely destroyed." "No, Sam," I said softly, placing a firm, reassuring hand on his shoulder. "Clara and Chloe destroyed themselves with their own greed. You chose truth. You saved those veterans, and you saved my father's legacy. You're more of a man than anyone in that hall tonight." Sam looked up at me, a small, fragile smile appearing through his tears, and nodded slowly. "You cannot fix toxic, envious family members by sacrificing your own integrity to keep their secrets. For years, I allowed my aunt and cousin to walk over me, believing that if I kept quiet, endured their insults, and stayed away, our family would remain peaceful. I thought my silence was a form of protection. But toxic, greedy people do not view your silence or humility as grace. They view it as a weakness to be exploited. They will happily burn your name, steal your honor, and destroy your hard-earned life just to satisfy their own greed. True strength isn't about quietly enduring cruelty from people who share your blood. True strength is standing firm in your truth, protecting those who cannot protect themselves, drawing an unbreakable line in the sand, and letting justice take its rightful course.